Hello, and welcome to the University of Maryland Extension's 4-H Health Rocks training video for the weeks 7 and 8. My name is Michelle Harmon, University of Maryland Extension 4-H Program Assistant in Garrett County. By this time, you should be becoming even more familiar with the Health Rocks curriculum and be more comfortable with your role as a facilitator and mentor of the Health Rocks program. With Lesson 7, we will continue to explore some of the long-term effects of the usage of drugs, alcohol, and tobacco products. If youth are faced with a choice of using or not using drugs, they are likely to ignore how it will affect them in the future. Youth need to understand not only the physical health consequences of using drugs, tobacco, alcohol, or other drugs, but also how the drugs might affect them socially and emotionally. In addition, youth need to understand how choices they make now regarding substance use can cripple their future. The icebreaker this week is do as I say, not as I do. It is a twist on the game Simon Says. Players will form a circle standing approximately 6 feet away from one another to give room for physical activity. The leader will select one person to start the game. The selected person will turn to the person on his or her left and say, I am brushing my teeth, as an example. However, the player will act out a different action. So the player might say, I am brushing my teeth, while they pretend to climb a ladder. The person on his or her left will then act out the action that was spoken aloud, but say a different action. In the example, the player might say something like, I am walking a dog. You will continue to go around the circle. The goal is to make it all the way around the circle without anyone messing up. If someone makes a mistake, then the whole circle must do the action that was said and run in place for 10 seconds. Every action we take every day has consequences. Not all of them will be bad, and not all of them will be good. The use of tobacco products like drugs and alcohol has consequences. We will now watch the video for Lesson 7. Health Rocks, inspired to be substance-free.
Today in Health Rocks, we're going to talk about taking risks. So how many of you have taken a risk? I'm sure all of you could raise your hand. I've taken lots of risks. As you may remember from earlier videos, I went skydiving. That's a huge risk, but it was one that I was willing to take because the chance of reward for me was high. I enjoy skydiving and I get a lot of pleasure from it. We take risks every day, and they could be little or they could be big. We take risks when we try a new food. We take risks when we talk to the person maybe sitting across the room that we've never talked to before. We take risks anytime we try something that we haven't done before. Not all risks are bad. Some of them are really good and have great payoffs. For instance, trying out for the school drama, or maybe making an effort to win that position as class president, trying out for a school athletic team. Could even be something like trying something new. Maybe you've never baked a cake before or tried to sew on a button. It's a risk when you try to learn a new skill. And these are great risks to take. Not all risks are good risks, and that's something else we're going to talk about. Sometimes there are things that are not worth gambling to take the risk. Trying alcohol, drugs, tobacco products. That's a risk that really isn't worth the consequences. We talked last time about causes and consequences. Well, there are consequences from every risk that you take. And again, this goes back to every decision that we make every day. We don't know always what the outcome of those decisions and those risks are going to be. So we need to make sure that before we make that choice and make that decision, that we have a good idea of what could follow, of what could happen after that decision is made, after that risk is taken. When you take a chance and consume alcohol, things may not always go as planned. What if you get caught? What if you get into an accident? How is that going to affect your future? Sure, you may get away with it one time, but are you sure you're going to get away with it? What are the possible consequences of trying drugs one time? There are many drugs that you can get addicted to just trying it one time. Is that risk worth the consequences of a lifetime of addiction? Think about these things when you think about risks and consequences. I want you to think about risks that you're willing to take. Think about risks that you take every day. Are you playing a little bit when it comes time to having that test tomorrow? Did you study as hard as you could for it? Or are you taking a chance that maybe you'll remember enough to get by? Those are risks that students take often. I'm not condoning those risks, but those are risks you can get away with a little bit better maybe than trying drugs, alcohol, tobacco products. Are you willing to risk having that drink and getting behind the wheel? What could the consequences of that decision be? Are you willing to risk not studying or getting enough sleep the night before you take your SAT? Those are risks you may not be willing to take. These are things that we need to think about. Every day we make decisions that could affect us. Some of these decisions may only have short-term effects, and some of them could have long-term effects. They could affect us as we go on through our lives and what we decide to do as a career, what we decide to do in school later if we are going on to a university to try to get a degree. Perhaps you're thinking about going into the military, or maybe you're thinking about going into the police academy. All of the choices that you make today could affect those future decisions for you, and they could have a disastrous effect if you make the wrong decision now. So I want you to be mindful of the decisions that you make every day. Think about the consequences that could come from those decisions. But I also want you to not be afraid of taking risks. Don't be afraid of trying something new. Don't be afraid of stretching yourself and reaching for those goals that you set, because every time you reach for a goal, you're taking a risk. So in conclusion, don't be afraid to reach for the stars. There's not very many successes that come without taking risks. Don't be afraid to take those risks. Just be prepared that not every chance you take is going to have a positive ending, but we can use those not so positive endings as a learning experience. But be mindful of the unworthy risks that you take. Make sure that any risk that you take is a calculated risk, that you have some chance for success on the other side. And watch out for those risks that are not going to lead you to any success, that there's no reward attached to them. See you next time.
After the video, give each participant the I Got Caught handout. Divide youth into groups of 2 or 3. Have each group draw an I Got Caught situation card. In their small groups, have the students discuss the situation and how their parents, school officials, friends, parents, and grandparents might react. Also have the youth think about how they might react if they were to get caught. Have them complete the questions in the I Got Caught handout. When youth are finished, have each group share their situation and how they answered the questions in the I Got Caught handout. Have them think about who was affected in the situation, how they might be affected. Have other groups discuss each group's situation and see if they agree. Then read the following situation to the group. Explain that they are to pretend that they have been with a group of their friends at a convenience store. Someone distracts the clerk while a member of your group puts alcohol under a jacket and steals it from the store. The group leaves and goes behind the store where they pass around the alcohol. You refuse to take a drink at first, but everyone else is drinking and making fun of you. So you take a drink. At about that same time, you get caught by the store clerk and the police. Have youth brainstorm all the risks that could occur if this really happened. Use the brainstorming reference to explain how to brainstorm. And remember, when you're brainstorming, there is no idea that's too crazy or too far out there. When you're brainstorming, the whole idea is to get every possible idea from every person. Have you think of as many risks in addition to health risks that might occur if they use tobacco, alcohol, or other drugs. Add these to your brainstorming list. The following questions may be asked to facilitate a discussion about this activity. Are these risks worth taking? Why or why not? Which risks might have short-term consequences, which are immediate or over a short period of time? Which risks might have long-term consequences into the future, a year or longer? Why is thinking about risks important? How does taking a risk make you feel? As you think about the risks and consequences of using tobacco, alcohol, and other drugs, how might taking these risks affect your future? How can you share what you have learned with friends to help them understand the risks and consequences? Besides tobacco, alcohol, and other drugs, what other risks and consequences are you faced with in life? Please remember that this is a potential list of questions. Please do not feel that you must ask every question that is listed on the handout. You are simply given these questions to help you facilitate the beginning of a discussion. At this point, you will begin to wrap up this portion of the lesson and summarize the key points. You can read the summary section to the students, which states, "We take risks every day. Some risks are worth taking, such as talking to the new kid in school or trying out for the sports team. And some risks are not worth taking, such as the use of alcohol, tobacco products, or drugs. Every action that we take has consequences. We need to learn to weigh out the consequences of our decisions to know if the risk is worth it or not." Our 4-H activity this week is the Bean Game. This is a financial literacy game that was recreated and reproduced by Jana Darrington from Family and Consumer Science from the Utah State University Extension in Utah County. Managing money means making choices. There is never enough money available for all of the things we'd like to have or do. This game will help youth to decide what is the most important to them. The game may be played individually, but it is much more effective if you play in groups of 2 to 5. Every individual or group will receive 20 beans. This is their 20 bean salary. They will receive a set of spending category sheets. The individual group must decide how to spend their income, their beans, based on life circumstances, values, and goals. Each item on the spending sheet has a set number of squares, which indicates how many beans are needed to pay for that item. The game can be played in several rounds, with the number of beans or salary decreasing with each round. This will force the students to reevaluate their needs and wants. There are some discussion questions provided to assist in leading a discussion, such as, why did you choose the items you did? In what ways were you influenced by your values, your goals, your previous experiences? Compare what you spent your beans on with another individual or group. This will complete the Week 7 lesson. The lesson for week number 8 covers the effects of drugs and alcohol on the brain. Youth will have the opportunity to create their own neuron and get an introduction on how the neurotransmitters in the brain work. A concept for youth to understand is the relationship of substance use and abuse and the effects that it has on the body and brain. The brain is involved in everything that we do, including thinking, breathing, feeling, and speaking. It is a person's command center and mission control. Our brains are always working, whether we are awake or asleep. Students need to connect that the brain is also affected when a person uses tobacco, alcohol, or drugs. Understanding the function of the brain and helping youth visualize the cells in the brain can help them recognize the effects of drugs on the messages the brain sends and receives. Through simulation activities, youth will have the chance to experience how messages can get confused through drug use. Learning about how the brain works can help students make better decisions about keeping their brains and bodies healthy. The introduction for this week will be an icebreaker of rock, paper, scissors extreme. The group will spread out and walk around. When they meet a person face to face, they will play rock, paper, scissors. Once they have a winner, the loser then becomes the winner's biggest fan and will follow their winner around, cheering them on. This process is repeated until there is only one champion. Every time a pair meets and has a rock, paper, scissors competition, the winner then inherits all of the fans, and they will continue forming that group until there is only one winner with a very large group of fans. Over the past 2 weeks, we've learned about the effects of drugs, alcohol, and tobacco products and the effects that they can have on our lives and health. Today, we will learn about how they can affect our brains and perception. We will now watch the video for Lesson 8. Health Rocks, inspired to be substance-free.
For the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about the effects that drugs, alcohol, and tobacco can have on our bodies. We've talked about other risks, what can happen if we get caught, how that can affect our future, our family, our friends. Today we're going to be talking about how drugs, alcohol, tobacco products can affect our brains. So what's inside of our brain? Well, there's a lot, right? So even though our brain makes up a small part of our body, it takes care of more complicated things than many computers do. It can perform more jobs than the most powerful computer. Your brain directs everything that's happening in your body. The things you think about, like picking up your hand, picking up a cup, the things you don't think about, like breathing. So your brain is the control center for your body. It controls everything. And unfortunately, consuming alcohol, using tobacco products or drugs can really affect how your brain handles things. So one of the things that we're going to talk about in this lesson is a small component of your brain called a neuron. So we're going to do a little activity after the video that will help you visualize what a neuron is. So we're going to go over this a little bit. You're going to get some chenille stems, may not be this color. You're going to be given 5 of them. And so what you're going to do with these, you're going to get 5 different colors. You are going to make a neuron. So I'm going to kind of go through it here with you, and then you're going to be able to do it on your own. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take one of your chenille stems and you're going to roll it into a little ball. You see my little red one here in the middle. This is going to represent the cell body. So that's where you're going to start. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to take another one and you're going to put it through the center of that cell body until it's halfway through, and then you're going to fold it in half and you're going to twist it. You can't see it, but that's my little white one here. And that is going to represent the axon. Next, you're going to take another one and you're going to cut it into 4 to 6 pieces, and you're going to stick those little pieces into your cell body. Now these are the dendrites. Now they're shorter than the axon, which is this long piece here. Some of them might be twisted. I tried to give this one a little bit of a twist so you could see it. I don't know if you can really see how I managed to twist that one or not. So these dendrites are part of your neuron. Now what the neuron does, the basic process of the neuron kind of works like a telephone, okay? So this is on the receiving end, like the dendrites here in the cell. Like if you're calling on the phone, you've got somebody on the receiving end, that's the dendrites of these cells. They're going to receive the information. The mouthpiece is what would go here through the axon, so that's how the signal is getting sent, okay? So it's received in the dendrites and sent through the axon. Messages can also be sent through the axon and received at the dendrites. Now we've got another color here, and I've got it wrapped around the axon. This represents the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath is kind of like insulation on a cord. So it's going to make sure it's wrapped around the axon here, and it's going to help keep that electric current moving through the axon. The last thing we've got here is another little ball down here on the end, and this is the axon terminal, or the synaptic terminal. This is kind of the end. So you guys are going to go ahead and put together one of these once we're done with the video. Now, messages in our brain travels through these neurons. It's going to travel from the cell body down the axon to the axon terminal in the form of electrical impulses. From there, the message is sent to other neurons with the help of a chemical called neurotransmitters. So in the brain, these neurons are connected. So it'll be one, and it'll be connected to another one, and another one, and they make long chains. This can be related to how people communicate. So if we're talking to somebody, you've got a sender and you've got a receiver. We've played a game before regarding that. So that's kind of what these are. They're the senders and the receivers in your brain. The use of chemicals can interrupt these little senders and receivers. Use of chemicals can interrupt those neurotransmitters, which are chemicals in themselves. So the addition of a different chemical can really harm that. It kind of block the transmissions or kind of mess them up and get them a little bit mixed up. So today we're going to be showing you how being intoxicated can impair your judgment and affect how you can complete some tasks. This is my daughter Daphne. She's going to be helping me out today. She's going to wear impairment goggles, and we have those right here. These impairment goggles simulate having a blood alcohol level of 0.08 to 0.15. And what these goggles do is they really mess with your depth perception and kind of make everything look a little bit fuzzy. So I'm going to have Daphne complete a few tasks without using the goggles, so you can see how easy these tasks would be for a person who is not intoxicated, somebody who has not had anything to drink or taken any sort of drugs. Then I'm going to have her put the impairment goggles on, and this is going to simulate having a few drinks and how it changes how these tasks are completed. So the first thing I'm going to have Daphne do is just walk along this line, heel to toe. And we'll see, she doesn't really have any problem doing this. It's a fairly easy task. No problem, right? All right. Next thing I'm going to have her do, I'm going to have her go back there again, and I'm going to throw this ball to her and have her throw the ball back to me. No problem. Okay, so the next thing Daphne is going to do now is she's going to take these cups and she's going to stack them up for us. Now, we're not going to time her on this because really we're just wanting to see how she does it. How comfortable she feels doing it. We can see that she's not shaking. She's not having any problem doing this. She's going to stack the cups right up. And you can see it's a fairly easy task for her to accomplish. Okay, good. The final task that I'm going to have her do is to pick up small objects. So in this cup I have 10 pennies, and I'm just going to put them out here on the table, and I'm going to ask her to pick them up and put them back in the cup. One almost got away. Okay, so you can see, again, this is a task that is not very hard for her to complete. She's able to very easily pick up the pennies and put them back in the cup. All right, now I'm going to have Daphne take the goggles, and she's going to do these tasks over again. And we'll see there is a bit of a difference as she completes the tasks this time. Are you ready? Okay, first thing she's going to do is try to walk on that line. You can see she's a little more wobbly this time. She's having trouble keeping her feet on the line and maybe a little trouble keeping her balance. Okay, go ahead and back up a little bit. Next, we're going to throw the ball to her, and we're going to have her throw it back and see how she does with that. Ready? Okay, all right, so she accomplished that without too much trouble. Next thing she's going to do is she's going to stack up these cups for us. So let's see how she does that. She's not doing too bad, but you can see that her cups are not quite as balanced as they were the first time. They're not as centered. But she did get her stack. Oh, I almost spoke too soon. She did get her stack all the way up. So the next thing, as soon as she gets her cups put away, we'll have her go ahead and pick up the pennies again. Wait, let me go around again. Okay, go ahead. All right, so you see she's having to use a little bit of a different method this time to find the pennies to pick them up. That's because where you're seeing the items is not really necessarily where they are. Okay, thank you, Daphne. So this is to show you that even though you might feel okay and you might feel like you're doing fine, let's say you've had a couple of drinks and people say, I'm fine, I can drive. This is to show you that you might think you're okay, but really that perception is off and you're not as good as you might think you are. As we can see from Daphne's demonstration, the use of drugs, alcohol, not only can affect how we speak and how our brain receives signals, it can also affect how we see things and how we can function. So our communication skills are not the only signals that might get mixed up when we use drugs or alcohol. Drugs are chemicals and they mess with the chemical balance in your brain. Alcohol and drugs can mix up the neurons in the brain. When this happens, impairment occurs. Impairment is when you are in a weakened or a diminished physical or mental state. As we could kind of see with the impairment goggles, how they affected Daphne and how she was able to complete the tasks. She wasn't at her physical or mental best when she went to complete those tasks. So I hope this gives you something to think about. And remember, if you happen to be out with friends and somebody has had maybe a drink or two and they say they're fine to drive, please remember they are not. They are impaired and their judgment will be impaired. The neurons in their brain could possibly be getting mixed up signals. So please be safe and remember, do not drive while impaired, whether with drugs or alcohol.
The first activity for this week had instructions given during the video. The activity of creating the neuron may be done during the video or after the video at the instructor's discretion. The second activity involves a game similar to telephone. Ask the group to form a circle. In this simulation, tell youth that they are the neurons. Their mouths are the axon terminals sending messages. In the brain, the messages would be sent by special chemicals called neurotransmitters. Explain that their ears will receive the message representing the dendrites. Ask the youth if they have ever played the telephone game, where a message gets whispered around the circle. When it gets to the end, it is hardly ever the message that was started. Make sure everyone knows the instructions. Start with a simple message and see if it will go all the way around the circle. This will allow you to check for understanding. Modify the game for round 2 by distracting the neurons or the youth with a balloon. Send a different message around the circle and repeat the transmission of messages in the telephone game. In this round, the neurons or students will be distracted with a balloon. Youth will pass the balloon between them, making sure to keep the balloon in the air the entire round. If you have time, you can play a third round, where you will modify it further by distracting the neurons or the youth even more by adding additional balloons. Youth are to pass the balloons and keep them in the air. Balloons are not to touch the ground. Start a third message and remind the youth that the message will need to make it all the way around the circle while keeping the balloons in the air. Explain that when a person uses drugs, the way a message is sent, received, and processed can be changed. Drugs are chemicals. When someone puts these chemicals into their body, they tamper with the brain's communications. They tamper with the way neurons work. Different drugs, because of their chemical structures, work differently. Drugs may imitate the brain's natural chemical messengers, or it may overstimulate the reward circuit of the brain. In either case, drugs mix up the signals in the brain. This week's lesson focused on the damage that the use of drugs and alcohol can have on the brain. Ideally, at this point, youth will begin making the connection between the neurons in their brains and how detrimental the use of drugs and/or alcohol can be. These are some questions that can be used to lead a discussion for the reflection this week. What was the best part of making the neuron model? Why would it be important for a neuron to have all of its components? How did making this model help you in your understanding of a neuron? What was the goal of the telephone game? What part of the neuron were your mouth and ears representing? How does your brain send messages? How did the balloons act like a drug? How did the balloons affect your ability to process the telephone message? Was it easier or more difficult? What do you think might happen if your neurons get damaged? To wrap up this week, you can ask the students questions to see what they learned from this lesson. Drugs and alcohol affect the neurons in the brain. Alcohol and drugs can impair us mentally and physically and can lead to an addiction. What is something that you learned about being impaired from alcohol or drugs that you can apply to your life? Think back to the telephone game with the balloons and the examples from the video with the impairment goggles. You have learned that alcohol and drugs change the work of the neurons in the brain, which affects the way people behave in negative ways. If people know this, why do you think some people might abuse alcohol and drugs? Why is it important to learn about the effects of alcohol, drugs, and tobacco products? At this point, we have finished Chapter 2, and we're ready for a Chapter 2 wrap-up. The Chapter 2 wrap-up includes activities that will give youth a chance to expand their learning outside of the program hours. Research shows that youth learn more effectively through hands-on experiences. As a result, we try to incorporate as much experiential learning as possible to promote positive development in the youth. Encourage youth to complete one or more of the following activities outside of the regular program meeting hours. The activities include a youth challenge, which is creating a drug awareness trivia game to be shared with younger youth. PSA ASAP. Write a 30-second public service announcement talking about the harmful effects of tobacco, alcohol, and drugs. Share the PSA with a local radio station. Meaningful mentors. With the assistance from your Health Rocks leader, mentor younger youth to help them say no to alcohol, tobacco, and drugs. Healthy goals. Develop a new healthy addiction, such as exercising every day, eating healthy snacks, or going to bed early each night. Track your behaviors after adopting a healthy habit. Social butterfly. Create social media posts about the actual numbers of youth using illegal drugs. Post these to social media with adult approval. Poster power. Create posters showcasing the healthy effects of not using alcohol, tobacco, or drugs. With adult assistance, hang up posters in your local school or Health Rocks meeting room. My future. Research a chosen career and create a multimedia presentation about the educational requirements needed for the selected career. Then brainstorm negative impacts that drugs, alcohol, or tobacco could have on our road to that career. Learning from experts. With the help of your Health Rocks leader, contact a lawyer and invite him or her to your next Health Rocks meeting to talk about the legal consequences of illegal alcohol, drug, or tobacco use. Also included in the Chapter 2 wrap-up is a summary of what was covered in the chapter and a series of checkup questions for the youth. The activity for Lesson 8 is 3D coloring puzzles. Each student will receive a sheet that has puzzle pieces for them to color. Once the pieces are colored, they can be put together per the instructions to create a fun three-dimensional creation. There are many different puzzles, and not all of them are going to be the same. They are unique and will be created even more unique after the students are able to color them. You have completed the training video for Lessons 7 and 8. As a final reminder, please email Ashley at the completion of this training video so she will have confirmation that you have completed the video. Please ensure that you are completing the attendance sheets each week and turning them into DJ. Thank you.